many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
And welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.tv. Thank you for joining me this evening. We're going to dive into the politics. Current race for the White House 2016, and Ted Cruz has dropped out. John Kasich has dropped out. So we have Donald Trump. Bernie Sanders bound to take it to California, but even with his win in Indiana with delegates and superdelegates, Hillary Clinton more than likely going to end up with the nomination. Before we dive into some of the other stuff, Ron Paul was on CNN, and I seen the clip, and then I also seen the antimedia.org post it. And on the antimedia.org, it's Ron Paul destroys two-party system. And they posted a clip, but here it says, longtime congressman and former presidential candidate Ron Paul made it clear in a recent interview on CNN that he will vote third party if the presidential race comes down to Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton. Though Paul didn't specify which candidate he would vote for, he did say Libertarian or Independent Party candidates are a possibility. Paul also said he couldn't support Ted Cruz, who has since dropped out of the race because he's a theocrat who wants to rule with religion. Paul didn't comment on his specific reason for not supporting Clinton, but one can speculate. The fiercely anti-war Paul opposes her militaristic tendencies. I want to play that clip here. So here we go.
Would you vote for Donald Trump if he wins the nomination?
No, I wouldn't vote for him because I see him as a very, very strong authoritarian. If he were strong in defending free market economics and sound monetary policy and cutting spending and not massively increasing the military spending and threatening people and wanting tariffs and blaming everybody, it's the Mexicans' fault, it's the Chinese fault. Maybe it's a fault of some of our policies. And that's what we should be doing. So I think he's misdirecting the people where we should be looking for the answer.
If it's between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, will you cast a vote?
I'll cast a vote, but not for either one of them. I've never bought into this idea that the lesser of two evils is a good idea. And,
so who would you vote for?
That wouldn't be. Oh, I would vote on principle and make my vote count. Probably vote for a libertarian, an independent candidate, but somebody that's trying to point out that there's no difference between these. As long as I've been watching politics for a long, long time, whether you have Republicans or Democrats, they're always controlled by this coalition in the deep state, the special interest, the powerful special interest. And whether it's a Ronald Reagan
even Donald
or
Trump?
an Obama, they still are controlled.
Okay, let me ask you this. The former House Speaker John Boehner, he called Ted Cruz Lucifer in the flesh. You worked with John Boehner. Should he have said that?
No, I don't think so. I think it's terrible that people talk that way, but they do this because they know that it'll get, if they want to get on the news. I mean, look at Trump. Look how successful he's been. So he has permanently changed the discourse because the media responds and say, guess what he said? Guess what Trump said? He said this, bash that. So the politician, this is going to get much, much worse because Trump has been rewarded. He's got billions of dollars worth of free publicity because he's mean and ugly and yells and screams at people. And I guess Boehner felt like he needed a little more attention. He's been out of office for a while, and guess what? He got the attention. But that's ugliness. I never liked the partisan stuff nor the personality stuff.
Could you support Senator Ted Cruz?
No, he's way too authoritarian. I mean, I think he's somebody that overemphasizes his religion. I mean, we don't want we want people to have sound ethical and moral and religious beliefs, but we don't want them to impose that or think that's the government's role. I see him more as a theocrat. I think theocracy very, very dangerous. So no, and matter of fact, he's too willing to use bombs, just as Trump's willing to use nuclear weapons, and he wants to build more of them. So they're all so militant, and I think that's a great danger. I've been fighting that the whole time I've been in politics. Is our country is way too militant.
So that clip stops right there. Now he's right. We get to the point where we look at the lesser of two evils, and it kind of bugs me when I see people that have claimed to be libertarian go that direction. I will, admit that there are things that Trump will do that will benefit us for a short time. Give me a second here. Also things that will hurt us in the long run. And I think that because a lot of us too are not into the globalist when it comes to this trying to even centralize national governments into more of a world government. I don't think that a nationalist that has authoritarian views on issues is the best candidate. Why I can't support Trump. Ted Cruz, I think, would have just been another establishment more type candidate. I think he was a little bit more Reaganish, but I think he was still, in a way, establishment. So I really didn't. Of course, John Kasich. Yeah, I looked at it as third party or no party or no vote were my options, because I just don't see any true change in a move towards freedom. Now, when I say that, I'm not saying that they might not do some things that might benefit me and make me more free, but at the cost of what and whose freedom is my issue. Because I have the understanding that even if you do things that allow me to express my freedom more, but you take other people's freedoms away, I know that's going to turn around and bite me in the butt later if I support that. And in a way, it will come around and bite us in the butt even if we're not supporting it. But that's even more of a reason to, look at third party as a potential. Now, I know there's a lot of Donald Trump supporters out there that would probably be cursing me right now, and probably are. And that's fine. Whatever. You're going to vote for whoever you want. You don't need to, curse me. But when we look at the people that we're looking as potential, presidents, are we really looking at any change? Any true change towards a freer society? Because I don't see it. Okay. I'm going to play last Friday's Mythbusters from Ron Paul Liberty Report. And this is actually covering some of Trump's foreign policy blunders. So we're going to go ahead and dive into this. And then I got some articles. I have probably about 3 or 4 of them that I want to cover. And then we'll kind of move along. So let's go ahead and cue this up here.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. Today is the day we do Mythbusters, and the co-host is Chris Rossini. Chris is also the editor of the website ronpaullibertyreport.com. Chris, welcome to the program today.
Great to be back with you, Dr. Paul. Thank you.
Well, very good. I understand that we have a few things to discuss as far as some myths goes. Some of the myths that we've been dealing with have been advanced, and maybe a few new ones with this recent speech by Donald Trump. So what do you have?
Yes, Donald Trump gave a much talked about speech this week on foreign policy, and it was predictably filled with myths and lots of contradictions, so many so that we really had to narrow down to fit into our time frame which ones to actually cover. So let's get started. Donald Trump started by blaming President Obama. He said, quote, "President Obama has weakened our military by weakening our economy. Ending the theft of American jobs will give us resources we need to rebuild our military." Meanwhile, this weakened military that costs us $600 billion a year Donald Trump mentioned this in the same exact speech, that trillions have been spent on planes, missiles, ships, equipment, building up the military to provide a strong defense for Europe and Asia. So it's weak on one hand and strong on the other. He contradicts himself. What do you think about all this, Dr. Paul?
Well, I think the biggest myth in this is that the weak economy has made the military weak. I think it's better to look at it the other way around. Unnecessary military spending makes the economy weak because it drains the economy. There's this myth that has gone around for a long time and still exists, that when countries get into trouble, they divert the attention of the people away from their problems, and they start a war, and they're preoccupied, and they're off fighting, and they're employed. But that never generates a greater wealth. Wars destroy wealth. And this whole idea that Obama caused the weakened economy and therefore the military has suffered, it makes no sense whatsoever. Besides, Obama, as bad as he is, he didn't do anything to help the economy. He didn't allow the liquidation of debt and reintroduce free market economics and change the tax code, the kind of things that could have helped the economy. He continued the Republican policies of Keynesianism, which is a bipartisan policy. And that means that deficits don't matter. Keep spending. You stimulate the economy by spending. If you need money, you print the money. It goes on and on. So there was the perpetuation of this. So, it's pretty tough in this day and age to even say that Obama isn't the only monster out there and suggest, well, when Obama took over, it seems to me like we were at the beginning of that downturn. The downturn actually occurred during Bush's term, but that's a consequence of bad monetary policy, and these downturns are predictable, not exactly when they'll start. We can only say that if you don't do the right things, they will continue on and on. But this idea that one president does it, no, it's been going on. We've been going through these cycles. And also it was predictable that eventually the temporary bailouts, the temporary inoculation with more money and more spending doesn't work. And that's been the big problem since 08 and 09. So it hasn't been that first we have the arrival of Obama. He makes the economy weak, and that's why the military is having problems getting enough money, which is a myth in itself, and we'll talk more about that. But that is completely mixed up. So if you take $600 billion plus, really, on military spending, it has nothing to do with defense spending. It usually aggravates our security. It doesn't provide more defense. So that in itself just takes away from the money that could be spent if it were allowed to stay in the economy. And then if you didn't have to bail out people and give welfare and let the real wealth stay in the economy and people were working and saving, this would be a different world entirely. It isn't. But this is an entire myth that the economy, the weak economy, caused not enough money being spent in the military. But the weak economy is a serious problem, and we have to deal with that in another way by deciding what our economic policies ought to be in this country. And they do need radical change because we're suffering from the consequence of probably 70, 80 years of bad economic policies that finally has caught up with us.
Next, Dr. Paul, lots of contradictions. Last night, Donald Trump was on O'Reilly Factor, and I'm reading on TargetLiberty.com that he's saying that he flat out would keep U.S. troops in Afghanistan, and he is ready to bomb Libya and take their oil. Yet when you listen to his speech just a few days ago, he sounded like when George W. Bush was campaigning. He on non-nation building, he says, we're getting out of nation building business. And instead, we're going to create stability in the world. Now, what's wrong with that statement, Dr. Paul?
Well, the whole thing is we don't have the ability, the wisdom, nor the money, really, to do that. And make somebody else pay for it is absurd because that's almost like asking the Mexican people to pay for a wall, between Mexico and the United States. It just doesn't happen. But this distinction between nation building and stability, there's a bit of a myth there because nation building is one thing. And I think Trump is on to something there, because a lot of people don't like, the occupation and this pretense that we can convert them into something they are not. But stability, how is he going to produce stability? Everybody would like stability, and I'm for stability, and that's why I want our troops and our government and our CIA out of these countries. But if you're looking for a reference on stability in some of these countries, it is true that Obama hasn't done much to bring about stability, but neither did Bush. The instability comes by us deciding that certain leaders aren't good leaders, and they might be Saddam Hussein or Assad and Gaddafi. So we decide we have to get rid of them. Yeah, they're imperfect, but these were guys that had stability, the stability that you want, and maybe that's what Trump has in mind. But he wants to own them as long as they do what he tells them, and then pay for what we want done, which is not true. He who pays the piper is the one that dictates the rules. So if we decide we want such and such dictator in Libya, which we sort of did, and it hasn't gone well, and they have to do our bidding, they're not going to give us money for it. They're not going to let us haul away the oil. That's a throwback to mercantilism, that we go invade and establish governments. So for the best I can tell from what he's suggesting is just another form of intervention, and has no chance of succeeding. Even if you had a temporary success, which over the years we have propped up these dictators, but they're always just temporary. I mean, we propped up the Shah in Iran, for decades, but it was a disaster. It led to the current problem just barely getting solved now and improving in a certain direction now. But propping up a dictator, and it could be argued that we produced some sort of stability in Iran, but it was temporary, it was artificial, and it led to the growth of the more radical elements and the overthrow and taking over the embassy and putting us in bad straits with Iran for many, many years. And it's amazing how that gets turned around. It was all Iran's fault for doing this, and never our fault for going in and creating a government that we think will create stability. So there is a big difference. The myth is that they're not the same, or there's not a significant difference between a nation building and an aggressive policy of demanding stability and demanding collection for the work that we want done. That is a myth. It hasn't worked in the past. It's not going to work. And besides, we're broke. We won't be able to afford it. And even with the relative success over the years, I don't even think we're capable of doing that anymore.
Next, Dr. Paul, is probably, in my opinion, one of the more frightening things that Trump has said. And it deals with, especially with transparency and accountability of elected officials, especially with our government that wields powers that no government should ever wield around the world. And he says, quote, "We're totally predictable. We tell everything. We're sending troops. We tell them. We're sending something else. We have a news conference. We have to be unpredictable, and we have to be unpredictable starting now." Now, what's wrong with that, Dr. Paul?
Well, I think he has it backwards. He hasn't been listening to our program. We're complaining all the time about not knowing what's going on. Do we know, do the American people know about the hit list, the kill list that the president looks at each week? Do we know where the next drone missile is going to hit? Do we know the next country that he's going to try to overthrow? Yes, they do announce, some things that I think Troop wouldn't announce, that, okay, we're going to start bombing such and such country. But that generally isn't the case. I mean, when there was an announcement that Obama was going to bomb Syria, the Congress and the people reacted against this, and it was at least delayed. But then it occurred anyway, more in secrecy. So we're talking about secrecy. He's arguing for secrecy. And I think that we need to know more because, of course, the policy is bad. Then you say, we're not going to tell anybody. Who's anybody? That means us, the people, aren't allowed to know. So he's endorsing with a much greater authoritarian approach to doing what is happening now, and don't tell anybody, what's going on. And maybe this coincides with his attitude of how Edward Snowden should be treated. Edward Snowden is not a hero to him. As a matter of fact, I think he called one time for the execution of Snowden. Snowden's trying to tell us what's going on. But this whole idea that it would be noble to never tell anybody anything that's going on, and that he can strike out anytime he wants. And that's exactly opposite of what should exist in a republic, because we're talking about war. He's talking about using the military and who's going to be arrested and who's on the kill list and how we're going to manage which leader we're going to assassinate. And I think we need a much more transparency rather than less. The myth is the last thing we need is more secrecy. What we need is more transparency of our government.
Yes, and finally, Dr. Paul, this last quote that I'm going to read is, if anybody in the military-industrial complex is worried about Donald Trump, this puts it to rest. They have nothing to worry about. More of the same is on the way. Bush, Obama, Trump. Here we go. Here's his quote. "We will spend what we need to rebuild our military. It is the cheapest single investment we can make. We will develop, build, and purchase the best equipment known to mankind. Our military dominance must be unquestioned, and I mean unquestioned, by anybody and everybody." Take it away, Dr. Paul.
Trump doesn't even mention, like most neocons would, they'd at least say it's for national security. He just wants military might, and everybody will obey and do exactly as we tell them. But he falls into the same trap of what the neocons are always saying. So he says that the military needs rebuild. Obama tore down the military. That is the myth of this election, that the military has been torn down. We right now have over 6,000 nuclear warheads. Trump wants to rebuild them. But Obama's already started the program. He has $1 trillion program of rebuilding and building new and advanced nuclear weapons. How many nuclear weapons do we need to intimidate the world? I mean, it's preposterous to think about this. So he does fall into the trap of perpetuating the same policies we have, because what drives policy in Washington is spending policy, which is fully endorsed by the candidates and especially now by Trump. The military-industrial complex loves this because it will be more weapon building. But what are we going to do with it? We just intimidate the world? I think it does the opposite. It wastes the money. It hurts our economy. It doesn't make us more safe. It incites people to hate us. It incites blowback. And this is the problem. It doesn't change anything. It has essentially an authoritarian approach opposite of what a non-interventionist foreign policy would be. Now, I know some people who are sympathetic to non-intervention might be sympathetic to some of the things that Trump says, because he will say, well, I'm sick and tired of the NATO and sick and tired of UN. It's a go-along policy, and some of the neocons don't like that. But there are some neocons that very much agree with this military policy. And it's sort of bewildering to me why some people sort of think Trump might have a neat foreign policy, because one of his key advisors is Giuliani. I don't know whether they must have forgotten about Giuliani. So he's part of that. And Bolton's not yelling and screaming about Trump's foreign policy. So people should be a little more cautious. But the real myth here is that the Trump policy significantly is not that different than what we have. It will be interventionist. It will have a more nationalistic tone, and people will be attracted to that. But it's not designed for what a national defense should be. It's to defend our country, to protect our liberties, and not to police the world. This is an approach to police the world, but it's a very attractive thing because we're going to quit paying for it. We'll collect the bills. We're good bill collectors, and we'll write up a good contract, and they're going to have to pay us. That's not going to happen. So, but in the meantime, More weapons will be built. We'll be into the nuclear weapons business, on and on. And if nothing else, it will still be very intimidating to those people out there that see us as the enemy. I had an interesting thing happen. I was on a recent trip, and a fellow came up, and he described himself as Mexican. Whether he was a U.S. citizen or not, I don't know. But, he said, it's pretty amazing. He says, when I go now, he says, I get frightened. He was a world traveler. He says, I get frightened when I tell them I'm American. He says, it's much safer to say I'm a Mexican because there's dislike because of the way we throw our weight around the world, and people disapprove of what we do. This will not change that. This will be, maybe it'll even be worse because we'll be doing the same thing and we won't be just trying to squeeze another dollar out of the American taxpayer or print the money and run up the debt. They say we're going to take it out of the hides of the people we're taking care of. So we're going to march in and we're going to, have stability the way we describe it. We're not going to have nation building. As long as you do what we say, you can have your own nation, but you'll have to do what we tell, and you'll have to pay for our services for taking care of you. It's a failed policy. That's not going to work. The only thing that's going to work in foreign policy is a non-interventionist foreign policy, which is designed to protect American citizens for the purpose of protecting their liberties. That means we should have free markets and free trade and friendships and a strong enough military that nobody would dare attack us. Believe me, we don't need to spend trillions and trillions of more dollars and more nuclear weapons to tell the world, don't mess with us because we will come back at you. That is not a threat to us, and it's a myth if anybody believes it. I do want to thank everybody for tuning in today, and Chris, thank you very much for being with us.
My pleasure. Thanks, Dr. Paul.
Thank you. And to all the viewers, I want to thank you for being here, and please come back soon. Thank you.
Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube or RonPaulLibertyReport.com. Go check them out. Subscribe on YouTube. Great videos live every day, so check them out, or 5 days a week. I do have some other articles, and if you do go to RonPaulLibertyReport.com, go check out one article. Not much difference between Trump and Clinton, and that was Ron Paul's. He was on Fox Business and talked about that. So again, RonPaulLibertyReport.com and Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube. But I had some other ones that I do want to cover here. I'm just trying to get them up real quick. First one I have is out of Reason.com. This one's titled, Is Donald Trump a Threat to the American Way of Life or just the Republican Party? It says, let's cut to the chase. Is the possibility of a President Donald J. Trump really an extinction level event to all that is good and decent about liberal democracy and constitutional order? As Andrew Sullivan claims in his widely read debut at New York Magazine, not even remotely. Indeed, if anything, the chaos Trump has rained down on the 2016 election may well accelerate the demise of not just the current moribund iteration of the GOP, but also drive a stake through the heart of a dead but still with us Democratic Party. Here's hoping. After quoting long passages of Plato's Republic, which he informs us helpfully he first read in graduate school and name checking the truly um, mediocre, um, mediocre Sinclair Lewis meditation on U.S. grown fascism. It can happen here. Here's where Sullivan ends up. Trump is not just a wacky politician of the far right, or a riveting television spectacle, or a Twitter phenomenon, and bizarre working class hero. He is not just another candidate to be parsed and analyzed by TV pundits in the same breath as all the others. In terms of our liberal democracy and constitutional order, Trump is an extinction level event. It's long past time we started treating him as such. I like and respect Andrew Sullivan tremendously, and I consider him a fellow traveler in a very broadly defined libertarian movement. Indeed, the Christmas party he mentions attending in his story was at Reason's DC headquarters. Far more importantly, he's a true pioneer in the world of new media and a thinker who brings an enormous amount of erudition and seriousness to political and cultural discourse. As much as any single individual, he reframed the debate on same-sex couples as one of marriage equality, and his anti-drug war stance nearly makes up for his pro-actual war stance over the years. But when it comes to Trump as a existential threat to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, he is not simply wrong, but incredibly wrong. I say this as someone who is an anti-Trump, as his first two ex-wives and Rosie O'Donnell put together. The emergence of Donald Trump as a presidential frontrunner has many, many things, and none of them is good. He is an embarrassment to the Republican Party, which is simply reaping the anger, resentment, and stupidity as sown for years. He's a cause of serious concern for illegal immigrants, especially Mexicans, and all of us who see relatively open borders and free trade as essential to any definition of American exceptionalism that's worth a damn. And he is a completely unqualified delusionatic whose grandma narcissism and radical inconsistency from one minute to the next is tougher to stomach than, I imagine, a Trump steak. But FFS, he in no serious way poses a threat, much less an extinction level one, to liberal democracy, a society of laws, not men, or limited government. However bad he might be as president, it's unfathomable that he would be worse than his two immediate predecessors when it comes to flouting law and convention. This is especially the case since he would face pushback on every front and has no experience with how to govern. The most important thing to understand about Trump is that he is not the start of anything new, but the culmination of a long degenerative process that has been at work for this entirety of the 21st century. He is a sterile mule in the end, not a jackass who might have hideous offspring. He is the effect, not the cause, of the ways in which the two major parties have destroyed themselves by refusing to take their own rhetoric or govern seriously. The Republican Party said it stood for small government when virtually every major action it has pursued, at least since the 9/11 attacks, has yielded the opposite result. The Democratic Party still trying to maintain a desperate collection of special interest groups that started morphing and changing and expiring by the end of the 1960s, lays claim to the mantle of caring about regular Americans, even as its last three major presidential candidates, John Kerry, Barack Obama, and Hillary Clinton, long ago achieved escape velocity from caring about anything resembling everyday reality. And then there's a simple fact that politics is less and less engaging to all of us. Thank God. Do we need to keep pointing that fewer and fewer of us form our identities, our communities, or our meanings in life via political affiliation? The last time Gallup checked, and just 26% of us admitted to being Republicans and just 29% to being Democrats. Figures that are near a historic low for the parties. Who can blame us and who can stop us? No one. Despite serious economic issues, which have been extended and intensified by government interventions when not caused by them in the first place, our lives in the 21st century have been getting better and better thanks to an unstoppable mix of technological innovations, cultural shifts towards pluralism and tolerance, and the decline in all sorts of public and private gatekeeping institutions. The libertarian movement that Matt Welch and I herald in the Declaration of Independence is real, and it continues apace in our personal and commercial lives. If you don't think so, take a few minutes to recall that your life was life back. Recall what your life was back in 2000, 2001. At every level of American society back then, people had less stuff, less options for life, even though things we did were spectacularly better than we had in the 1990s or 91. I'm no Dr. Pangloss, and I don't take material and social progress for granted. It's just that I believe eventually Americans route around political obstacles to achieve a more perfect union. Ask Obama about his shifts towards legalizing pot, embracing gay marriage, and pursuing criminal justice reform. If you don't believe me, he was pulled there by cultural forces that forced his hand politically. Yeah, but see, the problem is you go, well, gay marriage. Well, that's not a libertarian view. A libertarian view would not include government being involved in marriage. That's my personal take on that. Says here, arguably the one thing that was indeed better at the start of the 21st century than now was the state of the national politics due to a set of truly weird, unpredictable, and unrepeatable circumstances, a Democrat president and a Republican Congress that his early incompetence brought to power unimaginably at the time somehow managed to govern competently in a way that didn't completely piss away the peace dividend that came with the end of the Cold War. That said, serious discussion on foreign policy went missing and nothing was done to rein in the old age entitlement spending that is slowly bleeding the federal budget dry. Even back then, the rancor and partisanship of that period was seen as historically high at the time, with Bill Clinton being called a serial murderer by characters such as the Reverend Jerry Falwell and Newt Gingrich. Clinton's even darker twin brother by a different mother was chased from office for all sorts of real and imagined crimes against decency. From the indefensible and politically stupid to boot impeachment trial to the eventual elevation of the child molester Dennis Hastert to Speaker of the House. The negative spiral took over, and whatever brief moments of patriotic solidarity emerged in the wake of 9/11 attacks, there was more bipartisan support for the completely unjustified and civilian approved invasion of Iraq in 2003 than in 1991 dissipated fast enough so that by 2004 the parties were once again at each other's throats. You can read the rest of that. That's at reason.com. It actually goes on for quite a while. But I think this person is not seeing that each president before has put things in place that would make the next president even more powerful. Authoritarianism. He doesn't have to really know how to govern if he puts the right people around him. They will do his bidding. They will manipulate him too. Now, I have another article here. This one's from Foundation for Economic Education, FEE.org. This is by Jeffrey Tucker. Could a race between Trump and Clinton actually boost liberty? A contest between the worst might be for the best. Are you despairing of the presidential electoral trajectory? Excuse me. You're not alone. You are in the majority. You might even say the silent majority. A majority of voters in both major American political parties tell pollsters that they neither like nor trust frontrunners for the nomination. This is true even in states where Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump had their strongest primary victories. Political historians observe that this is unprecedented in modern history. The highest unfavorability rating for any nominee or frontrunner was 57% for the elder George Bush in October 1992, points out the New York Times. But in the same year, Bush's opponent Clinton was widely liked and trusted. That later changed, of course. In due time, Clinton became unpopular, but then Barack Obama arrived to save the day. So as just has always been, people have channeled their disgust with the system to back a new champion of change, someone people can believe in or at least not dread. Support candidate X as a lesser evil than Y. The electorate rolls from one season to the next, seesawing between this party and that, largely unaware that the system is playing them all for fools. Now, for the first time, large majorities report being fed up and disgusted with both choices. We already know, for example, that old-line Republicans deeply distrust and even loathe Trump. More importantly, 2/3 of Americans have no regard for him whatsoever. As regards the Democrats, Huffington Post reports that in 10 out of 10 national polls regarding favorability, Hillary Clinton has negative favorability ratings nationally in all 10. And the Wall Street Journal reports that 1/3 of Sanders supporters are on record as refusing to vote for Hillary. As Frederick Douglass said, the limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppose. Or FEE's Robert Murphy summarizes, this election has done what 100 articles could not. People no longer hate me for saying I'm not going to vote for anybody. With disgust so widespread and both parties deeply fractional, conditions are ripe for the two nominees to engage in the most bitter struggle ever for the remaining believers. The unfolding acrimony will undoubtedly leave a bad taste in people's mouths. The reputation of government and its processes will continue to slide. Already, government is ranked epically low for its corporate reputation. Only the tobacco industry scores lower. And they do have a graph up here. Tobacco 16, government 18, pharmaceutical 33, financial 37, energy 46, automotive 51, manufacturing 54, consumer products 61, retail 63, and technology 78. Widespread loathing. This is not some anomaly. It is part of a long trajectory. In international affairs, trust in government has been lower. It is remarkable to think that even during the Vietnam era, a mass protest and draft riots, overall trust in government to manage foreign affairs was 74%. It's been a long slide since then. Today, trust is a dismal 45%, and matters are even worse on domestic matters. At the start of Nixon's second term in 1972, 70% of those surveyed trusted their government, if you can believe it. Today, it is 38%. No poll in the Nixon era, even after Watergate, has ever seen the domestic trust level dip into the 30s. And they got another graph there. Long gone are the days when government attracted the best and the brightest, and when the presidency was the most exalted institution in American culture. What began with George Washington probably ended with Watergate. But the descent from tragedy to comedy has accelerated over the decades. The stature of the presidency and the public sector generally is a mere shadow of what it once was. Civic do-gooders laminate this, knowing full well that a large and invasive state depends on social consent for its stability and longevity, but it is actually a positive development for the cause of human rights. In a time of overweening state power, skepticism of government is a prerequisite for a future of freedom. It is about trusting people, not governments. People must receive for liberty to flourish. Political managers rely on public trust for their authority. The weaker is that trust, the more fragile is their rule. Here is something even more significant. A clear line has been drawn between liberty and power, creating a world in which the entire political system lives under a cloud. Will politics save us? It has not always been this way. For most of modern history, the cause of liberty has been identified with politicians who claim to represent it. Republicans have professed to want smaller government in certain areas, while Democrats have said they wanted it out of other areas. In reality, neither party has done much to reduce government. Government instead has constantly grown, no matter who is in office. Now either candidate even pretends to represent the cause of human rights or liberty. Instead, they unabashedly represent two flavors of authoritarianism, both domestic and international. Both Trump and Clinton agree on all public policy essentials: the exhaustion of police and military, the drug war, protectionism, immigration, perpetual warfareism, domestic surveillance, war as um, there will always be people who will be taken in by promised blessings flowing from a strong and well-intentioned leader. You need only to a Trump or Clinton rally to see that this is true, and it will only get worse as government continues to fail, as it must. The chorus calling for some variant of socialism and or fascism will only grow louder. But that is just on the surface, with majorities now fed up with the whole top tier. It will no longer be possible to regard the presidency as a proxy for some mythical will of the nation. The illusion is long shattered. It appears that the cause of liberty will have to go its own way. The means it must strengthen itself and fight for its own rights. Yes, it can be discombobulating to suddenly realize that the cause of human rights cannot be outsourced to the political class, but that is the reality, and it is a long past time that we deal with it. Moreover, it is not a curse, it's an opportunity. A president without a mandate, yes, candidates are using popular discontent, preying on the gullible as a path to personal power. Whoever wins in November, the trend of government becoming ever less trusted and popular is going to accelerate. Think of it: upon taking office, he or she immediately makes history as the most unpopular president in history, not just in the US but throughout the world. A majority of the planet will be allied against the world's most powerful man or woman. That has to make impression. Presidents like to take office with the feeling of having a mandate to enact their vision, but that sense will be hard to achieve when the outcome of both primaries and the general election are flukes, a result of unified but fanatical minorities pitted against a divided opposition, and then against a deeply unpopular establishment opponent at a time of economic and imperial decline. As a result, every policy is questioned, every failure of government is blamed on the president, every war gone wrong, every policy screw up, every late check, every foreclosed home, every infringement on rights and liberties falls squarely on his or her feet. Every inefficiency, bad deal, waste, abuse, fraud, and foul-up has a name written on it. At last, once the central state is under the complete control of avid authoritarians, liberty's hand will be clean. Politics in the U.S. is not unlike the last days of the Soviet experiment. Once confidence in the regime had been lost, there was nothing Mikhail Gorbachev could do to save it. If he tightened the grip, people became even angrier. If he loosened, they sensed the vulnerability of the system. At some point, the ruling class could no longer depend on the suspension of disbelief in the sustainability of their command and control system that had stopped working long ago. So it might, in the U.S., what triggered the meltdown, the election, sure, but the demoralization is foreshadowed by thousands of public policy failures, most recently Obamacare. This fiasco hit a vast number of people at the very core of what matters most: money and health. A vast gulf separated the promise and the reality. Millions were promised new access to health care. What they got was a system that forced people to pay for health care that they can't afford to use. The result was the biggest policy meltdown in decades, one that few in politics are willing to defend. Obamacare, heralded as a mighty legislative triumph of great minds and great leaders, became the archetype of more generalized failure. Can one person make America great? Let's just rule out right now the hope that Trump or Hillary can personally make America great or whole. In fact, the illusion that it could happen is ridiculous. Societies become great only through the diffusion of action among millions, even billions of individuals, one decision at a time. It is the absence of power, not its presence, that builds civilizations. It does not result from the central dictate of some great man or woman. Plus, not even the world's most powerful and intelligent person is capable of managing such a sprawling apparatus as a central state, especially not one with millions of employees and tens of thousands of agencies and sub-agencies, plus 200 years of embedded legal and regulatory cruft gumming up the works. The whole of the modern state in development democracies is structured to make them impossible to manage, as even Khrushchev discovered when he became the Soviet ruler. The bureaucracy does not obey you. Controlling it is like controlling a tub of dough. And you can read the rest of that article, and you can find it at fee.org. And the article is titled, Could a Race Between Trump and Clinton Actually Boost Liberty? Okay, now the problem with the end of the Soviet Union was, well, the bread lines, and yeah, you can see hard problems coming down the line. I'm not sure what, either candidate will mean to, their 4 years in office. But I can tell you this, that there is more than likely going to be a large amount of turmoil. It seems evident that this will press on. Now, you hear all the speculations of, oh, he's pro liberty and they're going to try to hurt him. I just don't see that. But, I don't ever rule anything out because we don't know what's going through the establishment's mind, or if they're going to just try to, buddy up with them. And I'm hearing talk too, chatter going on about Trump already surrounding himself with a lot of establishment people, that's kind of been secretly going on where certain people might have been seen talking to people maybe associated with, it's chatter that I'm seeing, but we'll see if we have any leaks that come out that actually show that to be true. Like I said, I just don't like a lot of what I've heard from Donald Trump. I don't trust him. Hey, he could surprise me. And I'll admit if he does. But I'll call him out if he doesn't. That's what I can do. I can try to hold people accountable when they go against freedom and liberty. And I think everybody should. Okay. I want to get into what AMTV is putting out, Christopher Green. And this one is talking about the economy, where Warren Buffett is warning of bank runs in 2016. And I've heard similar talk, and what I've heard is if Trump gets in, that they are threatening to organize bank runs. So I don't know what's true. You know, that's the problem with a lot of this. You get these real kind of shady or secretive little groups that just pop up. They seem grassroots at first, but then these small groups all of a sudden are able to organize and bring all this stuff together, and then all of a sudden they got all these people that are showing up, and it tends to look funded to me most of the time, and usually turns out to be funded, or parts of it to be funded. And there might be grassroots people just like the Occupy movement, but there were definitely those groups that were trying to control messages and the way they wanted the Occupy movement to go that were not grassroots. But let me get into this. Warren Buffett warns of bank runs. AMTV, Christopher Green.
Visit our sponsor, American Survival Wholesale, right now. Affordable, long-term, storable food. Christian, veteran-owned and operated. American Survival Wholesale provides food storage and survival products with the link below. Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Green, and you're tuning in to AMTV, Alternative Media Television. Today's date is Tuesday, May 3rd, 2016, and today's video, I want to talk about something that I think was passed off pretty nonchalantly over the weekend. The oracle of bailouts, Warren Buffett, warned subtly. And again, nonchalantly, I don't think Americans tuned in, and if they did, I don't even think they understood what he said. Basically warned that if interest rates stay at zero, or potentially turn negative as they've done in Europe, and probably more than likely here in the United States in the coming months, that he may just consider withdrawing his $60+ billion in cash assets that sits on the books and balance sheet of Berkshire Hathaway today, and taking it out of the banks, and then in turn depositing it in a vault that he owns, turning the key and throwing it away. What? Warren Buffett just warned of bank runs in the United States of America and potentially abroad. Things like what we've seen in Greece. And most Americans, I don't think, tuned in. If they did, I don't even think they understood it.
A stronger yen is great news for a lot of U.S. companies that are looking to export. I mean, that's something that maybe we wouldn't have anticipated at this point, given the stance from the BOJ and our stance at the Fed.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons I thought the Fed would have trouble a year ago in terms of raising rates, because a stronger dollar hurts the exporters, and a weaker dollar, which means a stronger yen or whatever it may be, that helps. That helps exports. There's no question about it.
Like you said, that you realize how much you don't know when you see some of
the cross currents. I mean, there's just a million of them.
But you must have spent a lot of time thinking about what central banks are doing around the globe, because it has a huge impact.
It's a fascinating movie to watch. I don't try to make money off the movie, but what we have seen in the last 7 years, I think very, very, very few people would have dreamt in 2009 that we would have this duration of low rates and have people still expecting low rates after the 7 years or so we're on this. No, it's a different world, and it's certainly a different world when you have a lot of money in euros, as we do, and you're better off putting it under your mattress than in a bank.
And there's nothing you can do about that with some of the reinsurance companies or the insurance companies, right?
There might be a few things we could do. I think Munich Re was talking about actually converting a lot of their short-term funds to actual currency and sticking them in a vault, but we haven't gotten there yet. There could be a point where you'd really want to start withdrawing currency. That would be an interesting point. If currency in a bank is worth less than currency in your hands or in a mattress, that could produce something in the way of behavior that nobody's ever anticipated.
Are you talking about a potential run on the banks, essentially?
Well, if the deposits aren't doing anything there, and they charge you for having them there, I might contemplate.
You see, Warren Buffett has about $60 billion in cash right now on the books, of which he has deposited in financial institutions at 0.25% or less. He's not really earning any kind of rate of return. You see, if interest rates turn negative, let's say negative 2%, just to put it in layman terms, if you deposit $1 of your money in the bank, you only get 98 cents back in return. So what Warren Buffett is saying is if it doesn't make sense, because think about this for a minute, it's mind-blowing. If Warren Buffett just got 1% on his $60 billion, that's $600 million a year in interest. If he got 2, 3, 4%, that's billions of dollars in free cash flow, in interest payments alone. So if he can't get any kind of rate of return, as is basic supply and demand in economics, this is exactly what anybody should do. He's just going to take his money out of the banks, it's called a bank run, and he's going to deposit it in a vault he owns, turn the key, lock the safe, and throw it away. Now, this is mind-blowing because you got to think for a minute, if Warren Buffett is going to do this, how does this affect you? We know Warren Buffett's going to be okay because he's a butt buddy of Barack Obama. He accepts the trillions of dollars of bailouts because he's a part of this big scam. This injection of funny money into the system through quantitative easing infinity and these policies. These people know what's coming. I was also watching a very interesting report from Ray Dalio, probably one of the most successful, wealthy billionaires you've never heard of. He's kind of the father of modern asset allocation. In fact, I did a great report on this myself on demand AMTV. Please subscribe if you haven't already. It's $4.95 a month or $49.95 a year, where I basically lay out a framework for an asset allocation to protect you and your family, to grow and keep your wealth over the long haul in the event, as you're facing these types of economic crises, events, and collapses that we've experienced in 2008 and 2009, for example. But he was talking about the fact, this was earlier this year, in the January through March period, I think he was in Davos at the time, said that basically in this period of prolonged negative growth, where economies really aren't growing here in the States and around the world, that if this continues for some time, not only is there asymmetric risk to the downside, meaning there's more risk poised to the downside because of the low interest rate environment and elevated, inflated, artificially stock prices, but that eventually this would result in a Great Depression. Like what we experienced in the 1930s with the closure and bankruptcy of thousands of financial institutions, or what we just experienced in 2008, 2009 with the closure of roughly 300, I believe it was. It was limited because, then again, they injected all that money from you into the hands of people like Warren Buffett.
Let's talk about monetary policy and the long-term debt cycle. There's a business cycle that we're used to, it lasts 5 to 10 years, and then there's such a thing as a long-term debt cycle. And the problems at the end of a long-term debt cycle is it's more difficult for the Federal Reserve or central banks to ease monetary policy. Because when you hit zero, you can't lower interest rates anymore. When you have large spreads, in other words, higher expected returns of equities or bonds, and they do quantitative easing, the seller of those bonds receives cash, and they buy other financial assets. And that process pushes those financial asset prices up and lowers their expected return. Then there is not much spread. So, for example, we have about a 2% bond yield, cash being nothing. In Europe and in Japan, there is no spread. That means that monetary policy makes it more difficult to either have credit growth or monetary growth. That end of the long-term debt cycle is the issue that means that the risks are asymmetric on the downside. because asset prices are comparatively high. At the same time, there's not an ability to ease. That asymmetric risk exists all around the world. So every country in the world needs an easier monetary policy. So that's that. As regards China, China is also dealing with the debt issue. I mean, a basic notion is you can't increase your debt faster than your income for long. And that means that they are going through an adjustment process, which means slower growth. And with slower growth, less inflation pressures. So we're now in a situation globally where China plays an important role on the rest of the world, and the rest of the world plays a role on China, and that is negative.
So if I were to decipher this, though, you ended on negative. To fully put it in a sentence, you think we're in a bad shape here? I think the risks are asymmetric on the downside. That's why I said before that I think the next major move in Fed policy will be toward a quantitative easing, not toward a tightening.
Do you think it will be effective? I mean, you point out that there's not a lot that we can do with monetary policy unless you get a quantitative easing.
I think it's going to be much more difficult this next time. And I think that there's going to, it's pushing on a string. The term pushing on a string began in 1935. It's that challenge. That means that there's going to need to be fiscal policy with monetary policy. That's a risky set of circumstances because politically, fiscal policy is controversial. Do you tighten? Do you ease? So I think that's why talking about how the machine works is an important thing because that's apolitical.
But for an investor who's sitting here trying to take all of this in and say, okay, so now what do I do? What do I do about it? If it's so asymmetrically going the wrong direction, can you even be long equities? We had Scott Minard out here before who said that he got flat at the beginning of this year.
Mm-hmm. I think that we don't talk about the positions that we have in the markets for obvious reasons. And I think you can't, I think you have choices. What are your asset classes? Is it going to be cash? Is it going to be equities? So for the most investors, I think it's important to have a balanced portfolio. That's why when we constructed this all-weather portfolio, it's a portfolio in which the assets are supposed to balance each other. The problem last year is that almost all assets in the world went down in value. That can't go on too long without producing a depression. So that means that the central banks have got to ease monetary policy and do the QE.
Also, people like Steve Forbes, I'm sure you're very familiar with, warning that in the next decade, post-2008 and 2009, doesn't even include this, he's expecting two drops of 50% or more in the U.S. stock market. Shitting your pants yet? See, these people are warning of these massive imbalances in our economy, these massive economic events and crises in the not-too-distant future as a result of these policies. Warren Buffett is nonchalantly warning about taking all of his cash assets out of the bank and depositing it somewhere else. That is the very definition of a bank run. So what do you do? How do you combat that? How do you prepare? Again, I encourage you to watch the video I put out on demand. Asset allocation, how to keep and grow your wealth, how to protect it from these types of events, how to get and stay rich, how to get and stay wealthy, how to do all these things to have peace of mind so that you know when the next crisis hits, when the next 50% shock hits like it did in 2008 and 2009, that you're protected. Again, you can't predict future results. However, through an asset allocation model, as Ray Dalio suggests, you can do a whole heck of a lot. You know, keep in mind, if you lose 50% of your money, you need a 100% rate of return to break even. That's a huge move. Many Americans haven't recovered since 2008 and 2009. So they experience another shock like they did in 2008, 2009. It's all over, if it's not already. But in addition to that, I didn't want to just talk about Warren Buffett and his huge warning. I also wanted to give you some powerful tools today. I wanted to talk about an acronym BIG that you may or may not have heard of before. Some speakers have talked about this in the past. BIG, a set of 3 steps that you can implement in your own lives to empower you personally and professionally. So here's my take on it. B stands for books. Read more books. In fact, most Americans, they say 98% of statistics are bullshit, but this is actually a real one. Most Americans read roughly 1 to 2 books, maybe a year. That's it. They're consuming most of their education from miscellaneous sources. It's miscellaneous bullshit coming from the mainstream media boob tube, for example. And as a result, and in return, they're only getting miscellaneous bullshit knowledge impregnated into their mind. They're not reading enough. You know, one thing I do agree with Warren Buffett on, and I actually implement myself, is that he reads 400 or more pages a day. 400 or more pages a day. Something that I also do. Because he believes in educating himself first, finding answers in these books, researching things that other people have experienced that are experts in various areas, before he does anything else. In fact, most of life's questions, arguably all of them, are in books, if you just open one up. People have had the same problems before. They found solutions. There's experts that have dedicated their entire life to a particular subject or topic. It's all in a book. And all you have to do is open it up and read. So books are so powerful. It's your education. It's how you invest in yourself. You also do it through seminars. You do it through events. You do it through networking. You do it through watching our videos on demand. The Mastery series with me, of which I've got 5 videos up right now. I'm giving you powerful models and systems that I've created for you. I wish people would have taught me this years ago. Invest in yourself first. Read. People ask me, well, Christopher, how do you find time to read? How do you possibly read 400 plus pages a day? Easy. I don't watch TV. I don't watch the bullshit mainstream media. I just read. And I'm so much smarter than the general population as a result of that. And I've accelerated my growth. I accelerate my success on a daily basis because of that. Because I do that one simple thing big. Books. The first letter in that acronym. I. Letter number 2 stands for the individuals you hang around, the people that you associate with yourself. You know, your mom probably told you that you are who your friends are when you were growing up. You know, the 5 people in your quote-unquote inner circle that make up your personal network truly are who you are. So if you hang out with losers, I've got a newsflash for you, you're also a loser. If you hang out with people that are successful, I've got a second newsflash for you, you're actually successful as well. Congratulations. But not only do you want to hang out with people that are successful and on your same level, you also want to hang out with people that are far above the level that you want to grow into, that have more expertise than you, that are stronger than you, that are more successful, that are more adept in these certain areas than you, that are better than you, so that you grow towards that. You become them. You associate yourself with that success. In fact, I had firsthand knowledge of this when I was playing sports. I was a water polo player, and as a freshman, I remember getting thrown into the water and basically getting my ass kicked. You know, manhandled. Really hit right between the eyes and blood gushing down my face and going, shit, I need to get a lot stronger. That's what I learned that day. I wasn't as strong as I needed to be. And so what did I do? I actually went out and sought a coach. And I hired a coach, and I started lifting weights. 3 short years later, through that daily routine of consistency and taking those small steps, I became stronger. And as a byproduct of that, I became a Division I All-American in just 3 short years. I was literally one of the best water polo players in the country because I took massive action. And I associated myself with the right individuals, and I sought out people that were better than me, that had more experience than me, and I also sought out a coach. I'd like for you to think of me as your coach. Associate yourself with the right individuals. Those are at your level and at a higher level. People ask me, well, what should I do with my family members, Chris? Or maybe aren't on that level. Well, you can still hang out with the people that you love and care about. They might not be on your level, but you also need to seek out those people in your business, professional and personal life that are at your level or above and beyond of where you want to go, because you become those people eventually through association. G, the 3rd letter in the acronym, stands for go big. Take massive action. How do you go big? How do you achieve that? You know, I think there's this misconception. People are always focused on the outcome. They're focused on the big success, the Oscar moment, winning the championship or the title. But they don't see what it takes through the baby steps, the daily routine, and the small tasks that get you there. And that's what I mean by massive success or going big. Not only setting big goals for yourself, high-level goals, and viscerally writing them on paper. There's something about making that a reality, writing it viscerally with a pen and paper or on a chalkboard or something like that, or with a dry eraser and marker, setting those big goals, but also taking steps each and every day that breed that success. Just like I did with the coach at the time when I was playing sports, by lifting weights every single day, by eating right, watching my nutrition, working hard. I remember one thing my coach used to tell me was, patience, Christopher. It'll come. The same thing can be applied not just to sports, not just your personal life, but also in business. By taking those steps each and every day so you get stronger and you also grow. Setting the goal very, very high and putting it to paper. And the great thing about it is, even if you don't achieve that very high top-level goal, that you set for yourself, even if you fall somewhere in between, you've still achieved a lot more success than you would if you just set a mediocre goal down here. Set massive goals, big goals, and then put it into action through your daily routine. You've probably heard before, you can't build Rome in a day. You can't, but over time you will, which leads to that Oscar moment, leads to that championship win, leads to that massive growth and eventual massive success. So refresh BIG, the acronym, the 3 letters, B, read more books, educate yourself, invest in yourself first. Seminars, networking, all of these things before you do anything else. Read 400 plus more pages a day, or as many as you can. Don't watch TV. That's a great place to find new time to read more books. Find the answers in books. Again, you can find almost anything that you need to know in a book, even spiritually. There's another great book out there I highly recommend. Individuals, associate yourself with the right people, not just at your level of success, but also higher, so that you grow into that success and you become those individuals and those people, and you reach that level and height of where you really, truly want to be. G, the 3rd letter in the acronym, go big or go home, so to speak. Set big goals and take massive action through steps, daily steps in your routine. The small steps lead to big things. So the acronym BIG, and you've maybe heard some of this before, people have different take on it. It's really simple advice that very few people actually take, implement, most importantly, on a daily basis. You see, people say knowledge is power, but I believe that mastery of that knowledge is power, but more importantly, the execution and mastery of that knowledge is power. It's through the execution of it. It's through the action. It's through the BIG. Reading more books, associating yourself with the right individuals, setting high goals for yourself, and then taking those steps day by day and actually putting them into action that grows and breeds that massive success. You see, all this ties in together. The warnings of Warren Buffett of economic collapse and potential bank runs, Steve Forbes warning of 50% plus market moves in the next decade, something we need to plan for. Ray Dalio warning of us of a Great Depression because there's no real growth in the U.S. economy or abroad, and there's 0% negative interest rates. All this ties into not fear-mongering, but empowering yourself, educating yourself. Again, tune in to our on-demand channel. Watch my Mastery series. Hey, everybody. I'm Christopher Green, and you're tuning into AMTV, Alternative Media Television. Today's date is Tuesday, April 26, 2016. In today's video, we're going to talk about asset allocation, the most important tool in your investment toolkit. How to get and stay rich. More importantly, how to get and stay wealthy. But even more important than that, how to have peace of mind when the next economic crash hits. With the 5 videos, asset allocation model, where I give you actionable advice and an actual sample portfolio that's mine to build on, where you can take notes and establish a community with AMTV Alternative Media Television. Implement the 3 letters of BIG into your own lives and make sure that you've got peace of mind when the next crisis hits. Know that you've prepared in advance, and that nothing will stop you from achieving your dreams or reaching that level of success, either in your personal or business life. Again, it's all up to you, folks. You control your own destiny. You set the tone for that. You control your actions, your day-to-day routine that results in that eventual outcome. Your Oscar moment, your equivalent of that championship win. Take this advice and implement those 3 points in your life today. Start with a simple step and subscribe on demand at $4.95 a month or $49.95 a year. Join our underground community that makes up Alternative Media Television. Take the bull by the horns. Don't just consume this information and let it pass you by. Hear the things that Warren Buffett is telling us and warning us about, and then do nothing about it. Again, you don't want to be the guy that wasn't prepared or who hasn't prepared ahead of time when that next crisis hits. Imagine having the peace of mind when the market drops another 50% in the not too distant future, knowing you've already taken action and you already control your destiny. And in the meantime, you're achieving massive success personally and in business. And you're not just surviving during those crises, but you're thriving. Remember, it took 20 years post the Great Depression for the economy to recover to break even. It took only 2-ish after 2008 and 2009. Chances are that when the next crisis hits, it's going to take far longer than a simple, measly 2 or 3 years. You need to prepare now. Think optimistically. The ball is in your court, no one else's. Share this video out everywhere. Make it viral, hard-hitting it in your face. I'm Christopher Green. And click that link below to subscribe on demand. Do it today. Take one small step that will lead to massive change, massive action, and massive success in your life, determined by you. Peace.
Christopher Green, AMTV. Check him out. Subscribe. Me and him share quite a bit of different viewpoints, but the economic viewpoints, we're seeing the same signs. So we share some of the same views on that. But being a Trump supporter, he doesn't completely look at the free market the same way I might. But when we're looking at the banks and what Warren Buffett was talking about, you know, it's really kind of a warning that most people weren't going to pay attention to when it comes to the everyday populace, the, you know, go home, watch sports or a sitcom and don't really pay attention to things like that. Most people I run into don't follow the economy or nothing like that other than work's doing good or work's not doing good, which really in a way is a judgment of what the economy is doing, the actual economy. But they, because they don't really look into anything like that, they just look as a bank as, oh, you know, you just put your money in there, it's there, not realizing that there could be a day when you're not able to access that money. And trying to suggest something like that to them, they might not understand. But there's other countries where they're starting to understand. They've had their bank accounts frozen for a day or two, and now it's making it harder for them to get their money out. So when Warren Buffett talks about basically putting the money under your mattress, you might want to, you know, take that advice, because he's understanding something. He's saying on a program that, again, the everyday person, even a lot of maybe investors, aren't really always paying attention. They're looking at charts and all this, and a few of them will catch it. I just, you know, play Christopher Green's clip with him playing what Warren Buffett said. You probably already know this. Definitely, if you tune into this broadcast, I tell people pitch your eggs in multiple baskets. Definitely don't keep all your money in a bank. Buy gold and silver, but don't put all your money in gold and silver. I recommend maybe a little bit of Bitcoin. Don't put all your money into the Bitcoin, though. Food, guns, ammo, seeds, water, things to get off the grid, things to become more self-reliant, and protect yourself and your family. It's not one thing that's going to help you. It's multiple things. I always tell people, you know, I'm a prepper. And they go, well, you know, what are you going to do if this happens? And then this could happen. And how are you going to prepare for all of it? And it's, well, you don't have a 100% bulletproof plan for anything. You take measures. You put yourself at more of an advantage than the next person. That doesn't mean you need to go fill a whole room with ammunition, or a whole room with food supply, or a whole room with bottled water. There's other steps you can take. and, water collection where it's not being outlawed. Solar, battery backup, wind. And I'm not talking these big ones. I'm talking about the ones that you can put on your own house that are pretty efficient if you're in a windier area. So, when we're looking at the economy today, it's in a way unlike it has been in the past, because so much of our infrastructure in manufacturing has been moved out of the country. We still have some, but we have, machinery that hasn't been built in who knows how long. But it still runs perfect, but it's running over in a different country. We could try to make new machinery. It'll take us a long time to perfect getting that type of stuff in, to actually run good products. We've seen it with other manufacturers where they stop producing something, sell off the machinery and try to reproduce it, and they can't reproduce it. Definitely the way they previously did. It takes them forever to put out a decent product. We have other things that are constantly changing, but we don't have regulations that are promoting, hey, let's create here. We have cities and states that are making it more tax-wise and regulation-wise appealing for companies. But I actually look at that in a negative light as in a positive light. Yes, it brings those jobs and those, the ambition to maybe attempt to start a company to those areas. But the problem is by allowing the federal government to overregulate, overtax, the states have to give up their taxation, which means they, in turn, rely more on government grants and fundings, and then they are coerced into going along with things that the federal government wants. So again, it turns around and kind of bites you right in the butt. Now, I kind of want to talk about this. It kind of relates to what we were talking about with business, the government regulation. This from Tom Woods, TomWoods.com. The government shut down my neighbor's business to keep me safe. I'm not kidding. My neighbor's business, which we all loved, was shut down. She was selling... Or was she selling heroin? Was she selling explosives? Was she selling raw milk? No, chicken salad. Back when I was a resident scholar at the Mises Institution in Auburn, Alabama, a woman on our street made the most delicious chicken salad you've ever tasted. I was addicted to it, and I'd never particularly liked chicken salad. Then one day, we couldn't buy any more from her. We went berserk. I needed that chicken salad. But the local government decided I was too stupid to make a basic judgment about food safety. She was told she could not sell chicken salad out of her home. She needs some kind of industrial-style kitchen in order to satisfy them. But she wound up getting the last laugh. She opened her own store, the Chicken Salad Chick. And before long, word of mouth had made her chicken salad a sensation. She now has a couple dozen locations throughout the southeastern United States. So whatever competitor making inferior chicken salad ratted her out got what they deserved. In fact, if you go to her main store, you'll see the Mises Institution mentioned on her stories, on her Our Story sign, because we loved her chicken salad and wrote in her defense. I mention this because that's exactly what I discuss on the show today, how government stifles competition and benefits existing interests. And you can read the rest there, tomwoods.com. But, we talk about this on the show quite a bit, that large corporations can help lobby to pass laws that make it where, there's a penalty if you do something. But the penalty is low enough that those existing large corporations can afford to pay a penalty and get a large benefit for just paying a penalty and breaking a rule or regulation. While that gives them a competitive edge, if the small startup attempted to do that, that penalty would put them out of business. So we see a crony capitalism, corporatism, come into effect, and it's not a free market. And I've seen another thing by Ron Paul talking about he doesn't even, the word capitalism has been, dirtied up, and that he's kind of like in the saying of a free market. And free market capitalism is basically what he's talking about. True, capitalism, where everybody can be a capitalist, not a crony capitalism or corporatism that favors the existing establishments. And that's how you have, in a way, a monopoly, but they'll always call it a regulated monopoly. Just like they call your power company, where you don't have options of, I want to go to this power company. Well, that's a regulated monopoly. A lot of times they'll share the same lines. These lines are shared through the different companies. One company might charge less, the other one might charge more, and you're literally streets away, which I'm in that case. Streets away, just a couple streets down there on a whole different company, and I don't have an option to switch. I don't get that option. And I talked to someone that worked at a power company call center. I said, what do you say when people go, well, I want a different power company, and you tell them no? And what do you say? They call you a monopoly. And she said, yeah. And I have to tell them that we're a regulated monopoly by the state or government. And, putting these words, well, it's a regulated monopoly, or it's a state-run, or state-controlled monopoly. We're a monopoly, but we don't, make that decision. Another way that crony capitalism hands the responsibility off to the government. Okay, I wanted to get to this one article here. Give me a split second here. Okay, many of you've heard me talk about this before. It's probably a couple of years ago, year ago maybe. I know I've talked about it multiple times, but more people renouncing citizenship. Well, we have another increase for people looking to renounce their citizenship. And this is something that I brought up before too, because, people going, yeah, we need to build this wall. And Ron Paul has warned about it. I warned about it. Many people have warned about it. And I see people that have warned about it supporting Trump. And it bugs the hell out of me. But this out of Forbes.com, U.S. raises fee to expatriate by 422% a second time. When the news broke a year ago that the U.S. was hiking the fee to renounce U.S. citizenship by 422%, there was a backlash. If anything, the uptick in American expatriations grew rather than declined, the U.S. State Department said raising the fee for reunification of U.S. citizenship is about demand and paperwork, perhaps, but a hike from $450 to $2,350 is still steep. That is more than 20 times the average level in other high-income countries. The State Department complains about demand on their services and all the extra workload they have to process people who are on their way out. Even worse, for the second time in a year, the State Department just did another hike. You can view it as yet another 422%. In fairness, the State Department presumably believes it is just bringing the fees into parity. Up until now, there was the enhanced $2,350 fee for renouncing and a smaller $450 fee for relinquishment. It may be a distinction without a difference, as the State Department put it. It was just harmonizing the two, which are similar in any case. In short, the fee is now the same, $2,350, whether you are renouncing or relinquishing. The State Department announced it would begin charging the $2,350 fee for individuals seeking a certificate of loss of nationality based on relinquishment of U.S. citizenship. Leaving the U.S. for good isn't just a matter of getting on a plane. It is not usually primarily about taxes, although taxes often play a part. And when it comes to taxes, persons leaving the U.S. may hope they do not need to keep filing with the IRS every year. Getting a certificate of loss of nationality and exiting will address the immigration side of the legal issue, but not taxes. When it comes to taxes, the filings are quite different. Filing and obtaining a certificate of loss of nationality doesn't mean the IRS will leave you alone. The global tax reporting at FATCA, the list of individuals who renounce keeps going up, and many aren't counted. Of those on the official list, 2013 saw a 221% increase, with record numbers renouncing. The Treasury Department is required to publish a quarterly list, but these numbers are understated. Notably, the President's or absence of tax motivation is not relevant, but that could change after Facebook co-founder Eldorado Severin departed for Singapore. Senators Chuck Schumer and Bob Casey introduced a bill to double the exit tax to 30% for anyone leaving the U.S. for tax reasons. That bill died, but talk of an even higher exit tax has entirely ceased. To leave America, you generally must prove 5 years of U.S. tax compliance. If you have net worth greater than $2 million or average annual net income tax for the 5 previous years of $160,000 or more, that's tax, not income. You pay an exit tax. That is a capital gains tax, as if you sold your property when you left. At least there's an exemption of 680,000 long-term residents giving up a green card can be required to pay the tax too. Being taxed one last time on your way out the door is not popular. Indeed, no one is likely to want to pay an exit tax if they can avoid it. And sometimes planning and valuations can reduce or even eliminate the tax. But taxed or not, many still seem to be headed for the exit. Some groups are especially vocal about their tax plight. Last year, dual citizens in Canada trying to shed their U.S. citizenship created a backlog at the U.S. consulate in Toronto. President Obama has joked about his birth certificate, but accidental American status is no joke. Many end up in unattainable financial situations. Still, a decision to expatriate should not be taken lightly. Yet around the world, many people are talking about it, and increasing numbers of people are actually doing it. You know, would you leave the country? Would I? It would have to be under certain circumstances. I'm not someone to just give up my home easily, but nor am I a fool. And hence why I am so much of an info junkie, why I critically think and look at all sides of the issues, because I think it's imperative that you do these things for your safety, for your security. And, you know, things could get better, they could get worse. You don't know what tomorrow will bring you. All you can do is hope for the best and plan for the worst. And it doesn't mean that you need to go overboard. What it means is that you are mentally, physically, and even, you know, a little prepped up and able to adapt to circumstances and environment. And when things don't turn into chaos, you should already know how to live in a society that is regaining its footing, because we've done it in the past. But let's actually learn from our mistakes. If we get the ability to reduce government, to limit government power over our lives, let's not repeat the same mistakes. Some other articles I didn't get a chance to really cover. There's one out of a libertarianfuture.com. Here's a libertarian definition compared to the left and right wing. And it breaks down marriage, healthcare, money, taxation, and war, and differences between left, right, and libertarians. And one out of reason.com, Google searches for Libertarian Party surge after Ted Cruz drops out. Out of Breitbart, good article, Hillary Clinton's 6-part plan to disarm citizens. Very interesting and must-read article. Could a race between Trump and Clinton actually boost liberty? I did read that one. The government shut down my neighbor's business to keep me safe. Read that one. Again, the U.S. raises the fee to renounce U.S. citizenship. Read that one. One that's been all over major news, medical errors. Now, the third leading cause of death in the U.S., that out of Daily Mail, UK. And you can find all of that on Anti-Tyranny News's web or on Facebook page, facebook.com/Anti-Tyranny News. Go check out the Facebook page, like it, follow it, and don't forget you can make it where you see it first on your news feed, and do the same with UCY.TV's Facebook page. You can just search them out there. And don't forget to go to UCY.TV. Check out all the other shows on the network. You can also scroll down to the bottom. There's an Amazon tab. When you shop Amazon through that tab, you get the same great deals, same great prices and shipping rates. And at the same time, you're helping the operating costs of UCY and the broadcast here. And there's also a support UCY tab at the top of the page, and you can also donate. And it's imperative that we have alternative media that will cover topics that you will not see on mainstream media, and to spread this information to make it widely known and not, thrown under the rug where the truth isn't exposed, because we have enough mainstream propaganda. We need the alternatives to counter that and being alternatives and not, as wide reaching at times. It's really imperative that we have as many out there as possible. You can also get some great prepping gear, like I was talking about, from My Patriot Supply. If you go to antityrannynews.com/mypatriot, it'll take you right to My Patriot Supply. And they got great prepping gear, water filtration, non-GMO seeds, and survival food. Go check them out. And again, same great prices, same great shipping rates, and at the same time, you're helping contribute to a freedom media outlet, Anti-Tyranny News, and help cover, this broadcast and all the other functions that we do at Anti-Tyranny News. Again, thanks for participating in the alternative media experience, and keep spreading information, and I'll see you this Friday.